Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for making time to join this, this launch of this report by this title you see on the screen. It's mobilizing research excellence in the Midlands to tackle COVID-19. I think in the last 9 months or so, all of us have been desperately busy just trying to respond to this challenge that sometimes, we forget exactly what we have done. And it is useful to take a moment to reflect on what we've done and how we've done it and see what we learned from that and what we can do better and what are the things that we would want to build on. So that's the purpose of this event. Under normal circumstances, you would have come to a place, you would have hard copies of this nice shiny brochure, but in this case, we will make sure you get an electronic copy of this report if you haven't already got it. So I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Sudesh Kumar. My day job is I'm Dean of Medicine at University of Warwick, but I'm here in my capacity as convener of Midlands Innovation Health, which is a collection of research-intensive universities across the Midlands. And then we will also hear from Sir John Peace, who's chair of Midlands Engine. And we will hear about a couple of case studies from Professor Kamlesh Kunti from Leicester and from Professor Paul Moss. And there will be a video clip in between. Don't worry, it's going to be a short one. And I hope all that would be really interesting and worthwhile for you. So I promise you'll not feel that this has not been worth joining. We've invited Dr. Luke Evans, MP, who is also on the Health Select Committee, to provide his reflections on the future of medical and health sciences going forward. And Professor Ian Hall, on behalf of Midlands Health Alliance, will also speak along with Martin Livermore and myself. Sorry, all of us will be concluding with a panel discussion. So I think what this report tries to bring out is the agility, the collaborative spirit, and all the innovation that you see here. And the trouble with these reports is that they sort of capture what's happened in a period of time. And this is, of course, something that's an ongoing thing. And I'm sure it underestimates the amount of research that we've done or the research income. So don't read the figures precisely, it's a lot more than that. But the point here is that we've hidden our light under the bush for far too long. And I think there's a lot more that you hear about a Northern powerhouse and London, what it does in medical and life sciences. Actually, we do fantastic work in the Midlands too. And there is a lot of examples there in that report. And I won't go through them in detail. You'll hear about some case studies soon. But it paints the picture of a very vibrant ecosystem. And I think that's something good that we can build on. And Midlands Innovation Health has worked along with other agencies here. So today you'll hear from Midlands Health Alliance, which is really collaboration between leading research-intensive universities and the NHS and all the infrastructure that brings with it. And you'll hear about what can be done with that. And Medilink has corralled, if you like, the industry expertise we have. And it's actually shown very well, how that can be of benefit in the COVID response. And of course, recently, Midlands Engine, that represents, the growth and development in Midlands and speaks for us to government, etc., did not have health as one of its themes. And people often think of Midlands as the place for manufacturing and industry. But actually, as you'll see today, there's an awful lot of really excellent work being done in this sector. And I'm delighted that Sir John Peace can, if you like, actually launch the report. We don't actually have a ribbon cutting ceremony. So I'm going to invite Sir John Peace to speak, and that can be the official launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudesh. And you're absolutely right. The Midlands is famous for many things, historically and currently. But perhaps the most outstanding thing it's famous for is hiding its light under the bushel. And hopefully the launch today of this very important report will help focus all our attention on just the important role the Midlands is playing in these particular sectors. Now, for those not familiar with the Midlands engine, let me just say a few words about that, if I may, because we're a partnership of local authorities, local enterprise partnerships, universities, businesses, and other organizations working with government and focused on economic growth and recovery here in the Midlands. Now, I'm sure most of you know the Midlands is home to 11 million people, 800,000 businesses, and it contributes to about £250 billion a year to the UK economy. It's an economy that about the size of Denmark. So it's a very material economy in its own right, but historically people have thought of it from the point of view of just manufacturing. Now, the Midlands Engine Partnership focuses on a series of important initiatives to overcome barriers to economic growth in the region and to support a sustainable economic recovery as we look beyond the pandemic. All of our work is underpinned by data from the Midlands Engine Observatory and is additional to the work already being carried out by our partners. Health and life sciences is one of the sectors which our observatory has identified as a key priority for the region, and why we have therefore brought together with the Midlands Engine Health Partnership this meeting and event today. It's such an important event for our region. And the Midlands is home to an exciting collaborative ecosystem primed for life science development and investment. Over 13% of all jobs in our region are in the healthcare and life sciences sector, some 593,000 jobs, including the largest medical technology sector in the UK, which alone is worth 2 billion in GVA to the UK economy. Very material. One of the most outstanding aspects is the region's research excellence capability, with world-leading science side by side with life-saving care. It's this combination that has allowed the Midlands to both support and drive the UK's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Regional partners have come together to deliver research excellence, rapid manufacturing, and life-saving clinical care. Two brief examples of this pioneering work in our region is, the first one is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which we as a country are placing such great hopes on, is set to be manufactured on Keele University's Science and Innovation Park through an agreement between Cobra Biologics and AstraZeneca UK in partnership with the University of Oxford. Collaboration. Secondly, earlier this month, the University of Birmingham announced the development of a new COVID-19 test which reduces testing time from 30 minutes to less than 5, while still delivering extremely accurate results. And of course, there are many more besides this, but all too often we hide our light under the bushel. The report being published today demonstrates the strength of the life sciences and health sector in the Midlands and the wealth of expertise and facilities in our region, which have been mobilized in response to COVID-19. Particular areas we have identified as strengths, and indeed in some, we are leaders in the UK, or indeed are leading the world. These include medtech, healthcare, immunology, genomics, clinical trials, design, regulation, and manufacturing. This expertise is supported by well-established collaboration networks such as the Midlands Innovation Health and Midlands Health Alliance. So it is with the greatest of pleasure today that we're able to launch this report and perhaps focus light on this huge opportunity we have here in the Midlands. And to realize that opportunity, what this event demonstrates is the power of bringing people together, working together, collaborating together to drive the common good. So thank you all for attending the event. And I duly, Sudesh, say the report is formally launched. Back over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'm not quite sure how applause works here. We could do a virtual applause, but I think that will be quite, you know, there is an applause at this point. So I think I'd like to move on to now request a couple of my colleagues to show a couple of case studies to give a bit more color. I mean, these are described in the report, but actually it's much better to hear it from some of the people actually involved. And first, I'd like to invite Professor Kamlesh Kunti to speak about some of the issues on driving efforts to identify and mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on BAME communities. He contributes to national efforts in by membership of SAGE, and he also leads a center at Leicester on BAME health. So I'd like to invite Professor Kunti, please.
So John, Sudesh, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to meet you all or e-meet you all. I've been given the remit to talk about ethnicity research. Just going to share my point. Can you see this?
Yes.
Great. Thanks very much. So I've been asked to talk about some of the work that we've done on ethnic minority communities. I work with Professor Davies, who's on the group at the moment at the Leicester Diabetes Centre. In relation to my presentation, these are some of the roles that I currently hold in relation to this current presentation. So in terms of ethnic minority populations, as you know, first cases of COVID came in December, but we started hearing about it more so in February. But we were the first ones to alert this on a tweet on the 1st of April, and I had a number of people who were trolls telling me that I shouldn't be doing this. And then after that, it all came about from the UK, first of all, and then the US regarding the disproportionate effect on minority ethnic health groups. And then since then, a number of us in the Midlands have been working with groups, Department of Health, PHE, and other national bodies trying to do work in this area. Over the last 9 months, we've had a substantial scientific publication record, grants awarded and conducted national work, evaluation of local studies as well, and contributed to other NHS work. So I'll just share some of that with you. This was a tweet that came out on the 1st of April. And as I mentioned, I had a number of trolls, but then 3 days later, the first data came out from ICNARC, the intensive care unit report, showing that indeed Black minority ethnic health populations were disproportionately affected. And then after that, we got very quickly into the work to start looking at rapid reviews because PPE was a major issue. We did rapid reviews for the Oxford Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine, which were useful for healthcare professionals. And then we started working in the area that I work in, diabetes and cardiometabolic diseases. And these were the early, really rapid reviews before any of the primary research started coming out from the UK and internationally. And then after that, we started talking about the new research that we were conducting, primary research, initially doing observational studies, then systematic reviews as well. And this has contributed, I think, hugely at international level because we probably led on the ethnic minority work from the UK in this area. We've also been involved in a number of national and international guidelines, including, for example, ethnicity aspects. Ramadan came bang in the middle of COVID pandemic, and we were quick to get the Ramadan guidelines out to help those fasting during Ramadan. We've contributed hugely to many of the national reports, including the Academy of Medical Sciences. A number of people from the Midlands were part of this report. And again, some of us were ridiculed because the data we showed that it could be really worse during the winter months. People would not believe them, but we've now seen that some of the data that were generated for this report do hold true. This was something I was asked by NHS England to chair, again, because of the huge impact that COVID had on NHS staff. And this came out quickly, and this was being used by hospitals and clinical commissioning groups to assess individuals and put them into categories of whether they were low risk or high risk, and then take mitigation circumstances and use whatever they could to overcome these high risk individuals. In terms of just looking at what we've done, this is just some of the work that I'm aware of. There's large studies that are being conducted across the Midlands, and what I've given on the left-hand side is just from Leicester. I'm not aware of all the others, but I know Paul, who's who's going to be speaking. He's generated a huge amount of funding. So on the left-hand side are some of the funding streams that we have accessed, and a lot of these have been accessed because we have the expertise in ethnic minority populations. On the right-hand side, the collaborations have just opened up, which we never thought could do before. And now we are using all these data sets to look at the impact, not just generally, but also in minority ethnic health populations. So just now to take you through why minority ethnic health populations may be at greater risk of COVID and COVID deaths is they could have a differential exposure, differential vulnerability, differential consequences, all of them leading to harm. And we've been trying to do work across all of these areas. The largest study was published by our group, 61 million people in England. And this shows the power of big data that we have in the UK. I don't think anywhere in the world can match the granularity of the data that we have. And this confirmed the huge risk, about 1.5 to 1.7-fold increased risk in ethnic minority populations, looking at the whole nation data set. And then since then, we've been working with Open Safely, looking to say, are ethnic minorities more likely to be tested? It shows, yes, they are more likely to be tested compared to the white population. Are they likely to be tested positive? Yes, again, showing that if they're tested, they're 1.5 to 2 times more likely to be positive. Are they likely to have intensive care unit admissions? And again, showing 2 to 3-fold increased risk of intensive care unit admissions. And this is after adjusting for most of the confounders that we could do for. And this is not a small study. This is based on 17 million people. And then finally, deaths. There's about a 50% adjusted risk of mortality in all ethnic minority populations. We've looked at other novel factors. This is Cameron from our group looking at obesity, and obesity is becoming a major risk factor for COVID. But this was one of the first studies to show that it may be disproportionately affecting ethnic minority groups more than the white population. As you can see the pink line at the top, this is the odds ratio for mortality or severe COVID. And you can see in minority ethnic health population, it's increased here. And this is on the right-hand side compared to the white population. It increases the risk of severe COVID and mortality is increased after a BMI of 26. So really within the normal limits of BMI categories. Since then, we've contributed to developing the first most comprehensive risk framework. So this is with Q Research, Julia Hipsley-Cox, who was in Nottingham, as you know. But there were people from Nottingham working on this with us. Carol Coupland, who's worked hugely on Q Research from Nottingham, showing, developing a risk algorithm. And this precisely tells us who is at the highest risk, taking all the factors in the GP computer systems. And this, I think, is going to be used once we go through the first 4 or 5 groups of vaccination priority groups. Then we worked with a large ONS data sets. This is 41 million people, again showing that people of ethnic minority groups, they have worse outcomes in multi-generational families. So if you have more than 3 people living in the family, there's increased risk. If you're on your own, there's also an increased risk compared to white populations. What about looking at what works? There's very little data except for the trials that you know about, vaccine trials and trials in hospital setting of giving medications. But this is the largest study, again, looking at 40-odd million people from the ONS. And we look to see, did lockdown make an impact by different ethnic groups. And this shows certainly both for males and females, the lockdown did have a significant impact. So lockdowns, no matter what people say, do work. And then I know Paul's working with Manish, looking at healthcare staff. And here we look to see if you look at seroprevalence, how many people have had an infection in the past. And what we see here is, again, ethnic minority groups more likely to have had an infection and tested COVID positive, and the junior doctors being more likely to be positive, the younger populations, younger doctors, younger nurses. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, anaesthetic staff less likely to be COVID positive because they have all the full set of PPE. We have worked with the South Asian Health Foundations, mainly colleagues from Midlands, and Sudesh is involved with that. And this was probably the most comprehensive review and recommendations that we came out with. And we looked at the evidence base that was present at the time, and this really hasn't changed. And this was not just for healthcare workers, but for the public as well, to try and make it in a simple format to educate the population about what works and what doesn't work and what puts them at risk. And the different colors tell you whether evidence is known, whether evidence is limited, where there's indirect evidence, and where we don't have evidence. And I'm not going to go into detail in view of time, but just you can download this from the South Asian Health Foundation website. And we developed a number of recommendations which were translated into different languages as well. And these have been used not just in the UK, but also abroad in Canada, US, and even in India. We've had people emailing us saying that they've used them. So these are the different languages. So in summary, there's evidence that I've shown now, which really is not controversial at all, that minority ethnic health groups have been disproportionately affected. The increased risk may be due to is associated with increased infection, the disease, poor prognosis. There isn't a single explanation at all, but social inequalities are likely to play a major role. And there's still an ongoing program of work looking at this. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Kamlesh. And while you take your slides down, may I take this opportunity just to say thank you. I think the amazing body of work that you've turned out has been incredibly influential and makes a real difference, and especially for the communities we have in the Midlands and across the nation. So I'd now like to invite Paul Moss to speak about some of the initiatives based at Birmingham around testing immune response hearings. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Sudesh. It's lovely to be invited to talk today. Thank you very much for the invitation. So many friends and colleagues on the line. It's lovely to see. So yeah, in the next 10 minutes, I want to talk to you about the work we've been doing in immunology. I was given a potential title which suggested leading the UK's, I think it was immunology testing and something else. I cut it down. It's still rather hyperbolic for me, but you know, I think Sir John says in the Midlands we need to blow our own trumpet, and I think it probably is true that the Midlands is leading the UK's immunology response. So let's try and convince you if that's true. I'm at Birmingham in the medical school with David Adams, and a hematologist and immunologist. And so what I want to show you today is I'll outline our work with the UK Coronavirus Immunology Consortium. Then I'll talk about national core studies in immunity, which I'm running as well. And talk about some work in the Midlands community, because this is very much a regional strength. And then some questions about legacy, really, and where we take it as a region now. So, I mean, the immune response is critical in the outcome of infection, obviously. Every single individual who gets infected with the virus, their outcome will depend on how well they cope with that. And now, of course, we've got vaccination as well, which potentially brings a solution, although there's a number of challenges there. And very early on in this pandemic, the reports, people identified, this is a report, I think the date there is May, 1st of May. I wasn't involved in that, but it was clear that we had to have an immunology response. And I'd been deputy chair and chair of the Medical Research Council's immunology board for 8 years, and I approached them and the Wellcome Trust, Jeremy Farrar, and said, you know, can we pull this together? And they said, okay, well, why don't you do that? And so after quite a lot of work, to be honest, we put together this thing called the UK Coronavirus Immunology Consortium. And in July, we was given this award. I think it was 6.5 million, as you can see, 4 million for the initiative I was putting together. And then they asked me to also incorporate the ISRIC follow-up study as well. And this was funded by UKRI, Department of Health, and we started in August. And what we did with this was we tried to coordinate all the research that was going on around the country, because so many universities were, you know, very reasonably undertaking research in this area. And so we worked around the country. This is a slightly earlier map, and we've got every country, some investment in Northern Ireland, not enough. Midlands probably not quite represented enough, but you'll see later that other initiatives more recently have more than made up for that. But really, so I'm running this from Birmingham as a chief investigator of this award, and I'm spending my time, you know, trying to coordinate these 19 centres, working collaboratively. And we have these research themes. 5 major ones. Primary immunity. Why are some people's immune responses able to fight off the virus? Many people are asymptomatic. And as we just heard from Kamlesh, you know, what is the importance of demographics in that? Ethnicity, BMI, why does that matter? Second one, protective immunity. Are we going to get protection from reinfection if you suffer from this infection? How long does immunity last? When we started this, you know, we really didn't know the answer to those questions. Third one, immunopathology. How does the immune system respond to SARS-CoV-2 on a molecular and cellular level? And what happens when the immune system overreacts? And we know that the immune system is obviously highly activated, and we think we can suppress that. Fourthly, cross-reactive immunity. You've heard about this. Common colds, does it prime some cross-reactive immunity? And finally, how does the virus evade the immune system? Just had a call with Cardiff Centre actually a couple of hours ago. Got some fascinating data that colleagues on the line, such as Lawrence and David, would be very interested in. So some very interesting data emerging. And what we wanted to achieve, improvements for patients. We put patients right at the front of this. We want better treatments, better diagnostics, and guidance for vaccine design, but also policy. And we've been closely in touch with Departments of Health and Matt Hancock and so forth on what we can advise from our findings, but also advances in fundamental and translational science. I mean, there's many outcomes from this. We've been running since August, so we're 4 months in, which isn't much usually for a research grant, but for this one, we want rapid outcomes. We've got quite detailed analysis from our centres now of particularly cellular immunity against the virus. From our own lab, we managed to show that cellular memory lasts at least 6 months, which is encouraging, and it was somewhat of a good news story right at the start of November last year. It was a week before the first report of the vaccine, and I think people were just looking for some good news at that time. And we now know some of the key inflammatory cells and proteins that are released, and those are now targets for therapy. And I'm now on the World Health Organization panel for choosing new therapies for their international trial. And I was on a call this morning at 6 o'clock, actually, with groups in Australia and California, some very interesting new antibodies and drugs that can be used to treat COVID. Some very interesting, stunning results, actually, but it's very early days. This is some science. I thought you'd like to see a picture. On the left, you can see those circles. All those dots, that's a cell against COVID. That shows that this person has had SARS infection, and then 6 months later, all those cells on that ELISpot plate are against the virus. And that was some work we did that was reassuring, as I say, a few weeks ago. But then the other big project that led on from this was National Core Studies. And this was an initiative of Patrick Vallance, Government Chief Science Officer, of course. And he wanted to coordinate COVID research across the UK rather than things being haphazard, how could we bring it together? So he asked me to run the immunity core studies. And this is quite a big initiative. So we've had up to £7 million just in the first year, and then another 11 probably for the next year. And we came up with this sort of concept of the 4 Ps. Predict, you know, how do we predict who's going to get infection from their genetic and demographic features? Protect, how does the immune system protect? And how does it prevent reinfection? And all of this will lead to preparing against the pandemic. And from that, we've been able to make investments. So I'm running this. Doreen Cantrell in Dundee as a deputy. And these are some of the investments we've made, actually. But I just want to pick out the Midlands ones because they're very big. As Kamlesh said, we've invested in the UK REACH cohort, which is in Leicester. Fantastic cohort with very good ethnic recruitment. And we were able to invest £1 million in the immunological enhancement of that. And I was talking to the team this week about that. And it's going to be fantastic. And of course, now the vaccinations work in that cohort will be remarkably important. Shielding, that's work done in Wales, but there's some link into Warwick with that. We're looking at informatic data. The teams are looking at. And then another one, Nottingham. This is Professor Corner's work, starting a cohort of 25,000 students in universities and higher education colleges, led by Nottingham, but going into Wales and Cambridge. And that will be a remarkable cohort going forward. And then there's obviously some work at Birmingham as well, linking into UK Biobank, the first cellular immunology work for Biobank, which is probably the leading cohort in the world, actually. And then we're also involved in studies of vaccine immunity. This is led from Glasgow, but we're doing some work in Birmingham in cancer patients. And I should say now that this is the leading solution for studying these vaccines in patients at risk. These patients, cancer patients, chronic kidney disease, never been tested with vaccines. So we're now leading that work, which is the first in the world and needs to report out soon. And in the future, we're going to focus on immunological assays. We want to work with industry. I loved Sir John's comment about industry, and we will do that, and we'll look at vaccine efficacy. And you'll know that this virus, of course, is mutating like mad, and we'll work with the Genomics Consortium. Somebody told me the other day, the virus doesn't mutate very quickly. It's about twice in a month. But there is so much virus around that it's able to test every genetic replacement at every position. So it's absolutely going through every change it possibly can to improve its transmission. That's from Paul Kellum. I think it was one of Lawrence Young's students, who's now a national leader. We're now leading the vaccine response, the immune response to vaccines. And we had a call with Jonathan Van Tam, Patrick Valence last night, and we're trying to test the 3-week versus 12-week vaccines, and also look at the response in the variant strains. So we've got a leading position. But there's so many examples in the Midlands. Obviously, Leicester has phenomenal power. The FOSP COVID, which is in the excellent report led by Chris Breitling, that's over £8 million. The leading long COVID study. UK REACH I've mentioned. Nottingham, such an incredibly strong HDR centre with Phil Quinlan. Warwick, I've had some fascinating talks with Dimitris Grammatopoulos and Lawrence and the Arden Biobank. It's one of the best collections in the country, and we need to, and then we'll be working with them across the country on that. And I haven't had time to mention it today, but it's in the report. The antibody assays that Binding Site have developed with academics like Alex Richter in Birmingham are world leading in sensitivity and quality. What's the legacy? We've got fantastic patient cohorts, great testing and science. We're highly collaborative. I think, as the report says, we recruited 20% for all the national studies in the Midlands. We recruit for the whole country. It's not something I see from other regions, I have to say. But we need to build on this, and that's perhaps the discussion for today. What will that be? Will it be new infection centres, regulatory science, data science? I think there's lots that we can and must do. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Paul. That is very informative, and it's very exciting. Lots of really important research to come out. So we look forward to that. At this point, we are going to see a video. So if I can ask for the video to be placed, please, because that actually showcases some other outstanding work that's happened in the Midlands. So can we see the video clip, please?
COVID-19 is a respiratory disease caused by infection with the virus SARS-CoV-2.
But the problem is that it doesn't only affect the respiratory system, it seems to be a multi-system virus.
One of the things that we know about COVID is that it doesn't impact everybody the same.
It was the UK that first reported the disproportionate impact on ethnic minority health populations with COVID. And the data show that they're more likely to be affected with it, they're more likely to have more severe disease, and they're more likely to die from it as well. Long COVID is symptoms that are present after 12 weeks.
We've recruited more than 50,000 people to COVID studies, which have really had an impact. We've done some really important work here to make sure that all of our research is applicable to all of our populations.
Been very fortunate. We've been funded a huge amount of funds for research. The largest study, the UK FOSS study.
As a consequence of the pandemic, many professional groups are collaborating in a way that we hadn't done previously, and that is only going to be of huge benefit to patients going forward.
The NRC is the National Rehabilitation Centre, which is a national initiative to completely revolutionise and develop rehabilitation knowledge, services and understanding in the UK and indeed in the world.
Digital Your COVID Recovery Programme is being rolled out nationally, and this is a platform that mirrors a supervised rehabilitation programme but clearly makes it much more accessible for a wider group of people. The development of the Your COVID Recovery platform has allowed us to deliver recovery at scale and pace.
The Patient Recruitment Centre, I think, brings more industry partners into the Midlands, so we can bring commercial trials to the region, phase 3, phase 4.
The nasal spray we've developed is incredibly potent in preventing infection. The formulation that we're using at the moment is successful in preventing infection, even at a 1 in 100,000 dilution.
We have such an opportunity here to really deliver really important outputs for the country, and we've seen that where the Midlands has consistently batted above its weight, both in terms of recruitment to trial, but also leading really important research initiatives.
I think we could take the lessons from the COVID pandemic to reshape the medical industry so that we can move innovations through to clinical benefit much quicker.
There need to be solutions for every single type of individual, and that's something we're very committed to.
Thank you. That was really, that shows a really exciting portfolio of work and much that we can look forward to. Now, to actually talk about the future and how we build on where we are, may I ask Dr. Luke Evans, MP, who also sits on the Health Select Committee, but is a Midlandser, to actually tell us a little bit about his thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Prof. Kumar, and thank you to the Midlands Innovation Health for inviting me to this event. And the irony is not lost on me, actually. Sat in the Midlands, delivering a speech innovatively through Zoom, discussing a world health pandemic, something that you wouldn't ever dream of doing only a year ago. And it's fair to say the spotlight of the world is on health sciences. There is not a better time to capitalize on the health science debate, what's going on, and raise that spotlight and profile, not only here in the Midlands, but in the UK and across the world. And the UK on the research side has a fantastic story to tell here. If you think about the PPE that's been put in place and the innovative innovations going on there, the vaccines, obviously, the advent of things like treatments like dexamethasone, but also understanding the pathophysiology. We've only heard just about it again today, is so important. This is all being done here in the UK. And so when we speak about the future, I think it's really important that we do pick up, as Prof. Moss said, the legacy. What is the legacy of this virus? Because it has changed the way in which we work all across every walk of life. And that's what I think is really key. And the Midlands has a vital, pivotal role in driving that forward. And so I really welcome today's report, because it's pulled together so many different groups and is a chance to showcase exactly what the Midlands has to offer. Why is that important? Well, there's a diverse, stable population that you can recruit from. There's the ability to robustly monitor and follow them up, and the equity of research and use a variety of sites to pull people together. But fundamentally turn that into some form of tangible reality. And that's really important. So I'd like to congratulate all on the call and all involved in doing that. Now, my background is actually as a GP. I trained at the University of Birmingham. And so it would be remiss of me to sit in a health speech and not use my approach. So if I take the Midlands Innovation Health and all the allied specialties, when you deal with a patient, you're taught to deal with the ideas, the concerns, and the expectations. And I think that's a really useful way of driving this forward as how we're going to take the Midlands into the next level as the years go on. I mean, the ideas we've heard already about it. We've got the long-term National Rehab Centre, not only about long COVID, but living with morbidity as life expectancy goes on is going to be a key thing of making a more productive workforce. And in a way to be able to keep people working in better health for longer is going to be really important. We need to have the ideas about getting the bench to bedside. Life science manufacturing hub is a way forward for the Midlands. It already has a history steeped in manufacturing. There's no reason why it can't move into advanced manufacturing in the life sciences, and joining the innovations that come from business along with the research that are done by the 7 big universities here. But there are clearly concerns. It's been mentioned several times, Sir John Pierce mentioned it here, that for too long, the Midlands has been hidden under the bush. And so the research can get overlooked and it may not be cutting through. We've got to remember that there are 33,000 people working in high-end jobs in this sector in the Midlands. And so we can punch our weight both nationally and internationally, engaging people from across the world to bring them in to continue driving the research and innovation forward. And what we don't want to happen is have opportunities missed. Post-Brexit, the UK is looking outward. How can we capitalize on that research and development and make sure that the UK is at the forefront and remains at the forefront? Government's priorities are to drive that forward. I see no reason why the Midlands can't be at the centre of that. And something that's been touched on here as well is joining up that collaborative working. And again, the Midlands can be at the centre of doing that. So that leads on to what will be the expectations. Well, I think that's the role. And from the scientists, the clinical workers, the entrepreneurs we have on here, the institutions, keep going, keep pushing that research forward, keep pushing the boundaries and communicate it to the likes of myself and leaders, local leaders and representatives, so we understand and we can take that message and shout from the rooftops about the fantastic work that's going on here. So we can spot those opportunities and promote just how good the Midlands really is. And that feeds back to government finally. Government needs to recognise the potential both nationally and internationally of what's going on right at the heart of the Midlands, how it can fit with the agenda that the government set, and then of course provide the funding to allow capital to be released and so that research grants can be applied for and got to help keep at the forefront and cutting edge. I think for me, stepping as a GP into politics, my health background taught me how to help those who can't and empower those who can. And yet the institutes in front of us, who we've heard from today, are doing exactly that. They're helping people who can't by empowering the scientists and the researchers to lead that way forward. And for me, this whole organisation exemplifies that and the way it should move things forward. And I hope that gives a flavour of where I see things going in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for that encouragement. We will do exactly that. Thank you. Now, the last part is meant to be a panel discussion. Now, the technology might limit us somewhat in terms of having panelists other than those named, I suspect. So let me try and stick to the script. So Professor Ian Hall, Professor Martin Livermore, can we see you, please? Yes. Thank you. And I'd like to welcome you to the panel. And the purpose of this panel discussion is to consider how we can apply what we have learned to deal with both this and future challenges. So can I start off by maybe asking yourself, why do you think Midlands is a great place to do such work? The medical and life sciences sector perhaps has used to have a lower profile in the Midlands compared to certainly London and the Southeast. So as part of the levelling up agenda, if you had to make a case for Midlands, what could you say? Can I start with Ian?
Thanks, Sudesh. Yeah, so the first thing to say is that the Midlands has got a comprehensive offer. So we have everything from cutting edge basic science within the universities and indeed in the industrial sector, right through to the patient translation side of things. And I think that the other particular point I'd make is that, and it's come around partly as a consequence of COVID, but actually was happening beforehand, is that we are integrated across the centre. So things like the Midlands Health Alliance, which Melanie Davis in Leicester, together myself and David Adams helped establish, provide the infrastructure to give a coordinated offer. And you can see that's been effective, because if you look at the recruitment into clinical trials, as was highlighted in the report, the Midlands has been, has been exemplar. So, Melanie and Leicester in particular, Leicester is one of the lead centres if you look at recruitment into trials like recovery. So I think that regional coordination is really important. And the final thing I'd say is that it's really important moving forwards in the post-COVID space, because that's going to be, there are going to be some massive health issues as a consequence of COVID, which aren't anything to do with COVID. It's to do with increases in patients presenting late with cancer, cardiovascular disease and other diseases. Because of the disruption caused by COVID, we need to take those lessons forward and make sure that we continue to deliver across the regional infrastructure and provide, an ideal environment to come to do clinical research, which will be nationally important, obviously, in fact, internationally important. So, thank you.
Thank you. Martin, would you like to add to that, or is there any other perspective?
Yes, I'm going to take it from the Pacific business perspective, in being able to translate and articulate science into a practical delivery. And Professor Quincy has already pointed out, one of the important parts of the region is at its point of enlightenment, the ability to see the unexpected and then to put something in place that actually has significant social and economic impact. Why the region? We are the largest diverse region, Midlands, population base and age base, which gives us a significant unique opportunity when testing things. We have got the assets, we've always have, and I go back to what Sir John says. I think over time, we forget of promoting what we have been exceptionally good at. Historically, we've been an engineering background, but actually that engineering background has made us look at things differently, improve society and those within society. So just to captivate, what we have got is a unique melting pot of both academics, those who understand policy making, and those who are able to translate that into a commercial and usable product. And I think out of all the regions, when we start to look at the global opportunity of what academic research can do, it is all about improving people's lives. And that is a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to just add by saying, actually, what you've seen along in some of these talks today is the excellent infrastructure and the people that we have that can really make a difference. We haven't talked about our clinical trials infrastructure. In the report, it talks about 50,000 people recruited to trials. This is what we can do in the Midlands. And I guess one of our challenges would be how to engage the vibrant industry base, particularly from an engineering sector. A large number of those are SMEs. That's an interesting point. How do we bring them in? Because we really have a very rich engineering base in the Midlands. So, but before that, I picked up a question in the Q&A, and the couple of people who have noticed that unfortunately the panelists are all, and today's list of people, speakers are all male. Absolutely right, and I don't think this is right. So first of all, I have to say that all of us as people on Midlands Innovation Health and Midlands, we are absolutely committed to getting as diverse input as possible, and particularly on gender balance. It looks like we managed to get it right on the video, which was better, but I think clearly this something we became aware of earlier this week when me and my colleagues in Midlands Innovation Health looked at the program, but by then it was too late to change. There's something that had already gone out and prepared. So, but something that we will definitely rectify in the future. So thank you for that. Now, I'd like to sort of go on from the last point about and think about the industry base in the Midlands and ask the question, how are we doing the best we can in terms of making sure they can contribute and engage and help drive for more jobs and also get involved in some of the work that you've just heard, not just in COVID, but other areas. So one particular challenge is that quite a lot of the industry base in the Midlands happens to be SMEs. They may not have the money or the big amount of money that pharma companies can invest. How can we get the best out of them? So perhaps I can start with you, Martin, because I think you know something about this.
Thank you, Kamal, Professor Kamal. I think we really do need to take a closer look at our industry supply chain. We mentioned SMEs, but I think to a certain extent we don't also look at other organizations within the industry base that have diversified in healthcare over the period. I take, for example, Maxell Europe, who has been a tremendous molding company supporting the automotive industry. A third of its production is now being turned over to healthcare and medical devices. If we take Jaguar Land Rover in terms of the health robotics and so many other examples, we should not look at the ecosystem as just being micro or small. Yes, in the early part of prototyping, we have got a small base there, but collectively, and their unique talents pulled together, means that actually, as consortiums, and we saw it already with the big ask that came out of Medilink recently, where SMEs from different sectors have come together to bring in inward investment and create employability to answer a lot to do around the PPE challenge. I would also bring the attention of the panel and that of the audience around the rapid ventilator challenge that took place. Significantly numbers of manufacturing organizations that may not have been tagged as medical device companies came to the opportunity and actually worked very well with academia and also public health to try and find a solution. So we have got an ecosystem. It's probably bigger than what we actually publicize. And I would reinforce what Sir John says. It's that collective, curated data of both industry, academic excellence, and policy drivers that will actually pin down why the Midlands is a place to do business.
Thank you. So as part of the life sciences industrial strategy, I remember seeing that our universities and the NHS organizations produce brilliant research. So that's doing well. And we get good bang for buck. But one particular gap that that work identified was in the UK, we are weak at manufacturing. So we might discover something, but ultimately it's the final bit, doing the manufacturing, and is done overseas in the main. Of course, the Midlands with our manufacturing strength is something that we could potentially contribute, could we not, just as we are seeing with the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. Just a thought. Now, I'd like to turn to Ian Hall to see how, about his thoughts about how industries could actually engage better with our excellent NIHR infrastructure.
Yeah, so the first thing to say is I think we do a lot of engagement both with large industry and small with SMEs as well. I think the large pharma part is fairly straightforward because they usually have they know what they want and they know who to engage with. I do think there are some challenges around the SME part, and the reason for that is that often there's a less understanding of exactly what is needed to sort of take things through the sort of the development chain, etc. And clearly it's our job as people at that interface, particularly across the biomedical research centres and the rest of the NIHR infrastructure, to facilitate that. So I'm delighted that Midlands Engine is prioritising work in the health space, because obviously that's one of the things which could help us here. And the whole reason behind the Midlands Health Alliance being established was to try and provide that interface so that SMEs and indeed any other partners can approach the Midlands to get a combined offer across the region, rather than just dealing with an individual academic in any single centre. But you know, the truth is we probably need to do some more. We need to facilitate that interaction, particularly for the SMEs in the Midlands, to a greater extent. And so hopefully COVID will provide an impetus to make those things happen over the next year or two.
Thank you, Ian. I think this time we need to start wrapping up, because I did promise we will finish no later than 4:30. What we have heard this afternoon was really some really exciting and really important work that is making a real difference. It's making a difference nationally, internationally, but also back to our own communities. And it's all coming from talent and facilities here in the Midlands. And we know that there's a lot more we can do. And I think what you have probably got a flavor of is that there are a lot of people here who are absolutely committed to that. And with the support of the Midlands Engine now, hopefully we can get some more traction, and with a bit of luck, even get a bit of that leveling up funding that we've heard about. So because there is a lot of potential here. And I think that is what I'm hoping you've taken away from this. That is, we've arrived. You know, health is definitely something we do really well in the Midlands. And if that's the one thing that you've taken away today, then I think this launch is a success. So I do hope that you will receive copies if you haven't already done. But we will be delighted to hear any comments or offers of support or suggestions for the future. Thank you all for joining, and have a good weekend.